I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 305 of Spawn Year. Spawn 164 was something of a shock to the system for me, as it did three things I wasn't expecting. I mean, I've been talking a big game about being ready for anything. I was prepared for more terrible, confusing, and incomprehensible, but I wasn't prepared for this. First, this isn't the start of the new rebooted status quo we were promised last issue, as Man of Miracles immediately intervenes as Al walks up to Wanda's house. Brian Haberlin even has a letter in the back acknowledging that they flat out lied about 163 being the finale of this arc. Jeez, I can't trust anything with this book. It's like Haberlin is Malbolgia just pulling my strings. That would be a great meta excuse for all the retconning and poor story planning in this book. The reader is supposed to feel as jerked around as Spawn. The whole thing was a crazy social experiment. McFarlane should use that. Secondly, I didn't expect Hine would acknowledge ever again that Al is still a reprehensible sociopath. Al was horrible to his wife and totally controlled her before his death, so he was an inhuman monster before he became Spawn. I thought the book had abandoned that idea. But now apparently those angel wings meant nothing because Al hasn't made up for his heinous sins against the woman he sold his soul for, and in deep denial pretended he was meant to be with, instead of admitting that he was desperately and unfairly making this poor woman's entire life about his happiness. Now don't get me wrong, I've been saying that forever. But I'm dismayed that Hine went there. But like so many things, it comes way too late in the game. Once again, he once progressed to a place where he seemed grown up enough to let her go and think about her happiness regardless of what Al Simmons did, because he wasn't Al. He'd become his own mature person, and then we had to regress him because Holguin, or maybe McFarlane, didn't seem to have a clue about where to take him without the origin crutch. And if the book isn't ignoring that Al never really changed, which I really would like to applaud it for, it's impossible to understand why Man of Miracles chose him and why it was supposed to see his struggle, death, and rebirth during the apocalypse as anything but Man of Miracles playing out a pointlessly elaborate one-player game with Spawn as a helpless pawn. And of course, the way Hine deals with Al as an inconscionable monster who never changed is by adding one more retroactive bombshell revelation. And this is the third thing I didn't see coming. We thought Man of Miracles and Armageddon was the catch-all device to answer all the mysteries, but Spawn himself was concealing the mother of all secrets, though I don't think it's the one Maman was after. The real reason he agreed to be a Hellspawn in the first place. Apparently, it was because he was so guilt-stricken for what he did to Wanda that he thought he deserved the worst torment he could think of. So he somehow suppressed that he didn't come back just to see Wanda again, and suppressed what he'd done to her. And he made it so he was repelled anytime he got close to her, which to my recollection has never happened. It turns out that it wasn't that he couldn't give Wanda children, or even the retcon version Holguin gave us, that Al hit Wanda and accidentally gave her a miscarriage. It was that he didn't want a desk job and loved killing people so much that when he found out Wanda had deceptively stopped taking contraceptives and got pregnant, he hit her as hard as he could, in a panel I found incredibly disturbing, to force a miscarriage on purpose. Wow. Words can't describe how stupendously screwed up this is. What exactly were we seeing with that flashback Holguin gave us with the milder abuse, if that's not what happened? Was that Spawn's memories coming halfway and his mind couldn't handle the whole truth, so it filled in the blanks? And if you wanted to punish yourself, why not just stay in hell instead of doing something that might put Wanda in greater danger? I guess because his mind was clearly totally gone already? But I wish the book had this in mind all along, because it finally makes Al exactly the right pick for a Hellspawn. He really is the most despicable sort of human being imaginable. And also really easily manipulatable if he hates himself that much. Imagine he'd actually progressed as a human being. That the identity stuff was handled consistently, that Spawn earned that redemption, was a hero, turned totally around, and was incredibly endearing. and then was rewarded with what he always wanted. His humanity was back, and even his wife, long after he'd given up any hope of being reunited with her. Maybe Terry ends up too much like Al used to be and doesn't come out of his crucible the better man like Spawn, and Wanda has to leave him. And just as Al is about to get her back without stealing her from her family, just she chooses him, he somehow gets that horrible memory restored. Maybe Bulgy just sadistically programs him that way. And even though he's not that horrible man anymore, he gives up what he most wants because he can't stand the thought that he did that to her, and finally suffers the tragic consequences even after becoming a model of selfless and noble behavior. I shouldn't rewrite the whole story, but I feel like if there had been some forethought and these same major plot points weren't thought of the issue before they came into play, that's maybe a natural and far more compelling convergence of ideas. The way the issue delivers this revelation is through an implausible and, once again, far less dramatic and compelling situation than it could have been. First off, it's presented like this was Man of Miracle's plan all along. But what would he have done if Al hadn't A, recreated everything exactly as it was, and B, done the obvious thing and tried desperately to get his wife back? Oh wait, he's Spawn. Of course he does the obvious thing. And Man of Miracles knows everything and probably knew how all this would turn out, I guess. So Man of Miracles pulls a Ghost of Christmas Present and makes Al invisible, allowing him to watch Wanda and Terry unnoticed while they just happen to have a melodramatic argument, conveniently the moment Al almost barged in on them, all about how Wanda is still looking at and apparently kissing pictures of Al each day and still can't move on. And Terry's jealous, afraid Wanda would go right back to Al since he's actually alive if he showed up. And then Wanda reveals that Al violently assaulted her to force a miscarriage. What are the odds that's the talk they have right then? Now, of course, Man of Miracles could have made them say all that, I suppose, for Al's benefit. I am sick of reading a story that's essentially one guy who's just moving everybody else around. It's like watching The Muppet Show if you could see all the puppeteers. Wouldn't this be a lot more interesting if Al had barged in and Wanda had to explain to him why they can't be together? Wouldn't it be far more impactful if he was shocked to discover his horrific deed from her as he tries to force himself back in her life? Frankly, doesn't he deserve to have her personally spurn him like that? And maybe she's desperately nostalgic for the Al she had before he went postal, but I really resist the kissing his pictures thing. I suppose being married to another insecure, damaged wacko might make her that way, but that makes me think she's so screwed up she would go back to Al if he showed up. Man, how does Cyan not wind up a sad, battered housewife raised by these two? So Spawn, mortified, decides to go right back to torturing himself. He returns to the alleys, he's got his old suit again, and he's brooding profusely. How in Bulgy's name does Haberlin get off calling this a new direction? But man, is Tan's gothic painted artwork masterful. That splash page of Spawn on his throne is almost worth all the unnerving retcon backstory. Unsettlingly, Spawn and I have more in common again. We both brought our hells on ourselves. I only hope that Captain Cog isn't right about Spawn here being a break from reality I'm getting farther and farther away from the longer I stay in this place. Spawn could have simply moved on and made something of his second chance, but he hated himself too much and he was a coward. Am I still doing this because I believe I have a life to go back to? Or am I choosing more of this hell because the prospect of returning to a world that doesn't want me is terrifying? What if I am still torturing myself needlessly? My gut still says to press on, that there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, and man do I hope I'm right. I am tired of this bleak, depressing alleyway every day. And to think Spawn is still winding up there, after 14 years of issues. I will still sign this Captain Spawn, but I hope to only answer to that moniker another 60 days. Signed, Captain Spawn.